friends, and welcome to episode 3, Casual Ableism Talks with 10,000 Able Interns. In today's episode, we are joined by our first guest, Sami Dar, co-founder of 10,000 Able Interns. 10,000 Able Interns is part of the 10,000 Interns Foundation, which champions underrepresented talent and promotes equity of opportunity. They run 2 programs that help meet that mission, the 10,000 Black Interns Program and the 10,000 Able Interns Program, both offering students and grads paid internship opportunities across a range of UK industries. In this episode, we will be hearing from Sami about the 10,000 Able Interns Program, what it is, how it started, and how you can apply for a place. We also discuss a whole range of topics, from access to work, workplace ableism, disability representation in the workplace, shifting the perceptions of disability, as well as advice for applying for jobs and internships. As always, this episode will be transcribed and available to read as a blog post on our website, casualableism.com/podcast. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining today and for sparing your time, and I just can't wait to hear more about it and just chat to you really, because I think it's such an important topic to discuss, and so it affects all of us.
Yeah, of course. I think internships are an aspect of the kind of employment sphere that's overlooked slightly when it comes to disabilities specifically. So, it's great that we can chat and kind of spread that awareness.
Definitely. So thank you so much for joining us, Sami Dar from the 10,000 Able Interns. This is really great. Can you just tell us a bit more about yourself, what it is you do, and just kind of who you are?
Yeah, so I guess, so firstly, I was born with cerebral palsy, so I'm a wheelchair user. I graduated from the University of Warwick in 2021. I studied business, and then prior to that, I kind of acknowledged a gap in the market for a better framework, or a framework to better cater to students with disabilities. So upon graduating, I secured a full-time job, and then alongside that, while I waited for that job to start, there was about a month window, and I started to work on this project, and then I reached out to a variety of people, including the co-founders of 10,000 Black Interns, and then we decided to build what is now the 10,000 Able Interns program.
That's really interesting. And so how did you hear about them in the first place? Because I'd never heard of them or anything, and it wasn't until someone I knew had worked with the 10,000 Interns Foundation in general that I heard about them. So how did you even come across them and start that journey?
That's a good question, actually. I think, it was, I knew people at my university who had received internship opportunities through the program, and just researching diversity initiatives. They were a program that was repeatedly featured and discussed when I was looking through different articles and through different people's experiences when it came to diversity, because I kind of, there wasn't much for disability, so I explored different areas, be it race or gender, and that was a program that frequently reoccurred in my research.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think it's just so important, because I think a lot of, in terms of the internships, there's a lot of talk about access to work in general. And obviously when you're applying for jobs, you see, you need a year's work experience. You need to already have worked in a different company. But without an internship work placement, it's really hard to enter that. And so when so many aren't accessible, or so many, it's harder, especially in terms of, the disability tax, where it costs us more to attend a job, to attend an internship. So finding a paid internship in itself is just so important, and especially ones that are open to recruiting people with disabilities. So how can someone get involved and apply to the program?
So in terms of applying, all you have to do is literally go onto our website, 10,000internsfoundation.com, and just click apply now. There should be a button for candidates to apply. They then have to fill out a short form. Our application process is very streamlined. All you have to do is, when it comes to other job applications, they can be a bit long-winded and arduous in that sense. So we've streamlined it to be, basic information, in addition to 200 to 300 words on why you want to be selected or about yourself. And then also they pick their top 3 sectors they want to be considered for, across a range of 15 to 20 different sectors we have available.
Wow, that's really good. It sounds like it's really kind of straightforward to apply as well, because so many, as you said, so many job applications, it's so many different stages, so many different forms to fill out.
Yeah.
The fact that you've made it streamlined that anyone can access that as well, because a lot of talking about disabilities, obviously it's not just physical disability, it's other forms of disability. So that a long form or having to write lots can be quite overwhelming to some people, or could be too much information. So the fact that you've streamlined that, I think, is really also really, really good.
Yeah, of course. I think I've applied for roles that have taken several days to fill out an application form, but you kind of have to come back to it and then finish off the application. But I think the estimated time to fill out our application form is 20 to 30 minutes.
That's really good. And so the applications are still open, is that correct, till the end of October?
Yeah, I believe they're open until October 29th. Yeah, great. I think so. So
people who are listening to this can still apply if they think this sounds like their sort of thing. And what sort of applications are available? Is it just in the major cities, or whereabouts are the companies based?
So we try and cater to wherever our applicants are. So it is predominantly London based, because that's where the kind of economic and corporate hub of the country is. But we do encourage firms to offer internships across the country, and many of the firms we partner with, many of the firms that sign up, have offices scattered across the country, so they're able to offer internships to cater to the location of the intern. And also, when it comes to disability, we're aware that it's difficult to travel. Like you said, it's difficult to get to the paid internship. So something we do stress is, if remote working is if traveling to an internship is the barrier, whether that be because of location or disability, we encourage firms to also offer a remote experience.
That's really good. And I think that's something that the pandemic has kind of benefited society in a way, is the working from home. I think that's really shaped the way that disabled people can actually work, because before the pandemic and before it was normal to work remotely, a lot of us with disabilities who couldn't travel, couldn't commute, even half of the time couldn't commute to an office. That was something that was really restricted. But now the fact that that's now so readily available, and companies are so used to supporting their workers from working remotely as well, is really good. And I think if someone is doing an internship with remote work, it's also a great tool to learn how to do that, because I think if you haven't, it's a skill almost working remotely, isn't it? So to have that as part of the kind of learning curve and as getting experience in that way is also really, really good.
Yeah, I think for myself, having started work, and just after the pandemic, I never really experienced pre-pandemic work, if you like. So for me I was almost grateful, because I can't envisage myself going into the office 5 days a week. I live on the outskirts of London, and my office is in central London. So to travel in every day, I drive. So to travel in during rush hour would take maybe an hour and a half plus. And to do that every day, both ways, plus I have to get ready in the morning, which takes me longer. So when you accumulate all of that time, it would just be impossible to sustain kind of in a long period of time. So the ability, the recent opportunity to work from home more has almost been a blessing for the disabled community, because like I said, I couldn't see myself doing that 5 days a week. I would have to take the whole weekend to recover, and then by the time we've recovered, it's time to go back to work. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work from home. And like you said, it's a skill in the sense that different expectations have to be met in terms of things like communicating with the team and maintaining that relationship and still being productive. So that there are aspects of it that may not be considered as strongly in the office that you have to take into account and carry forward when you are working from home, because you still want it to benefit your career just as much. You don't want to. There are there is the perspective that working from home detracts from the learning curve or the learning experience, because you do spend a lot of time on your own and you're not in and around your more experienced colleagues. But if you approach it in the right way and you communicate in the right way, I think that shouldn't happen.
Definitely. I think the communication skills are such an important part of everyday life. And I think that often companies look for someone, a candidate with good communication skills. So for those of us who are used to working remotely, then we already could have developed that without even having to try. I think that's really, really important. And for me, I actually studied remotely for a couple of years, my GCSEs, because of health reasons. So I distance learned from home on my own. So I was very used to that. And obviously being disabled, I missed a lot of school. So I was often catching up and working, doing homework and extra work at home. So I think I've always had that natural kind of, I just learned how to do it because I had to. So I think that it is great that it kind of you're forced to do it naturally. Then when you actually want to apply for a job, you can say I have good communication skills because I'm used to working remotely and I'm used to finding different ways to kind of talk to colleagues. And I think actually it's quite good because it forces you to have those kind of weekly meetings, and it makes you kind of maybe pushes you to kind of be in contact more. If you're in the office, you may not necessarily even talk to somebody, or you may not have a kind of productive meeting. But of course, if you have to have a scheduled meeting every week to sit down over video call, then you're probably more likely to get productive outcome out of that as well.
Yeah, of course, and I think it's more than just productivity or learning. It's also down to the social experience and making sure you have a close bond with your team, because that's very important in being productive and being comfortable in asking questions of your team and being in and around your team and working as a team. But also just that social interaction we require as human beings. That insistence on maintaining contact and communicating is really healthy for us if we're working remotely long term.
Definitely. And I think it does. It is really important that if you're working remotely, you do have that ability to get to know your team members, whether that is in meetings or one-to-ones or even on kind of chat platforms. Definitely. And I think that it's really great that your internships offer that alternative, because as you said, that commuting all that time and the extra time to get ready, it makes the day so much longer. And also the pressure, if you know that a company's flexible, even if you are in the office most of the time, even knowing that there is a remote option if you're having a bad day, or even if someone, people rely on PAs or carers. So knowing that obviously you're dependent on someone else. So if you have that flexibility that if for some reason a carer can't come in, or someone who normally drives you can't pick you up at a certain time, then you're not going to miss out on the opportunity. You can still then do the work from home without necessarily relying on anybody externally, which is always a really good opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I think beyond relying on others, if something goes wrong within your morning, or you wake up and something isn't quite going to plan, then then I think as a disabled person, one thing can throw off your entire morning or your entire schedule or set you back a long time. So I think not having to rely on going in every day or not being held accountable for being late. If you were late, for instance, instead of doing so, you just work remotely and not have to go through all of that. So I think it's a really good backup as well. If you do like going to office and you are capable, it's also a good opportunity to have that backup, have that safety net, so you don't have to be held accountable to things beyond your control, if you like.
Definitely, I had days where I had a power cut and the lift wasn't working, so I couldn't actually leave the buildings. If I had a job to go to in person, I wouldn't have been able to attend. But because I work remotely, I was still able to attend even though there was a power cut. And things like my mobility scooter, once the battery just completely stopped working, I wouldn't have been able to go out. But of course, working from remotely, I could, and I think it's really good to understand I have that opportunity and that variety as well, to be able to have that flexibility, not have to be held accountable if you can't get it, not letting anyone down either, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I agree.
And so you said you went from university to your first job, did you have any issues in terms of accessibility or ableism that you experienced in getting a job or finding work?
I think, when it came to internships specifically, I did struggle with, because when it comes to internships or applications in general in the corporate sector, you, you do have to focus on quantity because it's so rigorous. There are so many people competing for one role, as there are in every job, really. That you do kind of have to focus on quantity, and that was something I struggled with because I think when you have a disability, that your time is quite stretched, and I I struggled to put in applications at the same rate as my peers. I maybe put in 20 applications for job roles, 25, and my peers were putting in 80 to 100. And I think that really the more you put in, the more chance of success you have. So I think in that initial instance, there was a struggle for myself, which is part of the reason why I looked to set up the program. But I think ableism in the application process, it was quite positive that there were many firms that went above and beyond. There were a few that were not great at all, and I think when you come across those, they're not really firms you want to work for anyway. So they almost filter
Very true.
themselves out. So I wasn't too fussed by that because there were so many that went above and beyond, and that that was really impressive. So um, I think during the process itself, no, for the most part. I think when I joined my firm, upon reflection, um, it's a steep learning curve for a lot of firms because many of them haven't had an employee with a specific disability before. So it's a learning curve for so many. And in hindsight, I think there were some things they could have done differently, but a lot of the time I could tell they were trying to be supportive, but in certain areas, I feel like things were overlooked. So, like I said, it's a learning curve for everyone, and I don't want to be too critical because I got the feeling they were trying, but without that lived experience, it can be difficult to um, genuinely and holistically support you in that way.
That's very true. And I think that also in the whole, I think the whole kind of positive of having disabled people in the workplace, whether that be internships or just in employment, is that companies can actually see firsthand how a disabled employee is and what they may need or may not need, and how the variety of disabilities and health conditions that are so varied from so many different aspects and variations. So it's really good that I think by having the disabled talent within a company, that's the only way companies are going to learn. It's all very well them having training or going to seminars. They're not necessarily going to learn just from hearing it from someone else. It's actually going to having the person within their team. They actually then learn that maybe someone needs this, but someone else doesn't, and it's not a blanket thing because disability isn't a monolith. It's just so different. And so that's really kind of a really powerful message that that's how companies can improve. And we actually did a poll on our Instagram account asking if people had any difficulties accessing internships. And I think 58% of people said that they had, which, if you think of that, that's a huge percentage of people that had actually had difficulties in accessing them and even in work. And we get a lot of submissions from people who say that they have a lot of ableist comments from other kind of co-workers and from different people who are ableist in their mentality, where they don't think that person has a disability, or they don't think that they need a certain adjustment or accommodation just because they don't look the way that that employer sees disability. And that's what's so important, and that's why I think it's also great trying to raise awareness and include disabled people into companies so they can see the variety and that we're actually a really good asset to have within the companies.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to ableism from co-workers, I think there are two issues in place. I think, firstly, I think there needs to be firm-wide training when it comes to disability awareness, and not just within D&I teams or senior level teams, because when preparing to become a disability competent employer, the D&I teams and HR are very well trained and clued up on disability, but that doesn't necessarily filter down to the teams you're going to be working in. And that's really what matters most, because you want to be acknowledged and respected when it comes to disability from the people you're working most closely with, and that doesn't always happen. And B, I think when we're pitching the program to our partnering firms, one of the things we say is, it's a learning experience for yourself. It's an opportunity. It's a unique opportunity to have exposure to a specific disability that you may not have had in the past, and that's what we look to expose them to, really, because once you've had that initial exposure, you can build on that. You can add that to your experience within the HR teams and your sector specific teams. So that's something we really try and stress to teams. And I think also when it comes to the issue of ableism from co-workers, I think there are certain preconceptions about disability that limit their I guess tolerance to disability, because your coworker may come in and say, I need these adjustments and I have a disability, but they're not a wheelchair user, or they're not visually impaired, they're not deaf. So your coworkers may struggle in perceiving you as a disabled person or to be a disabled person. And I think that's another issue that needs to be addressed and can only be addressed through firm-wide training.
Definitely. And I think that we get lots of people saying that they have to take days off because of ill health, or they have to work from home some of the time, or they have to miss because of medical appointments. And if people could have seen a non-stereotypical looking disabled person, then they're not going to understand that without the awareness and without the exposure. And I think unless you've actually had a friend or a family member who has a disability of any form, then people don't necessarily even know the different types. I think it's only through kind of lived experience, whether that be from yourself or from seeing a friend or family member, that you actually kind of are more aware of the different types of disability, that someone may not look disabled, but they actually are. And it's very true that it's all very well giving the kind of the head of the company the training, but then the actual day-to-day staff that the employee is going to be working with does need to then also have that awareness. And that's also by companies and employees having a disabled employee. That's the only way they can really learn. So that's really good. That you're also offering the candidates themselves the opportunity, as well as the company and the employees opportunity. It's really going to be unique, that everyone benefits, not just the person who's getting the internship. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think also, when you've mentioned taking days off, I think another thing I've struggled with within the workplace is my contract stipulates that I only get 10 days of sick leave per year. And, as a disabled person, to have the same amount of sick days as anyone else is a little bit difficult, because I've had to take off, I had to use up, 10 reasonably quickly. And then, I'm on statutory sick leave whenever else I'm sick. And that means I either have to take reduced pay for the day I'm sick or not be sick at all. And in times where I felt as if I could use the money, I just haven't been sick, even though, I have the flu or I have COVID, or I've just gone to work anyway because I've used up my sick days, and I don't really want to take sick leave because it would mean taking lower pay. So there's also that too. Yeah. I think there needs to be more flexibility around sick days when it comes to disabled employees.
Definitely, and it adds more pressure on you. When you're actually ill, you're kind of lying there thinking, okay, I can't be ill for more than 10 days at a time, or I can't be, I've already used up how many days, so therefore I must get better. And that's kind of detrimental to your recovery as well if you're ill, because you can't, actually being disabled often, for example, when I'm ill, I'm kind of iller than the usual person. A cold affects me probably worse. And so therefore I'm kind of often iller for longer. And if I'm lying thinking, okay, there's work I've got to do, and I mustn't be off for too long, or I've got sick days that I've already used up, then that kind of almost makes it worse. You can't really heal properly and get better, because you're just worrying about the money, or about letting your team down, or about work building up. So it's a really good point about the flexibility with sick days. I think also there are companies that have flexible working hours. So for example, my employer, I'm really lucky that it's flexible. So if I need to do, more hours one day but less the next day, as long as the work gets done, then that's okay as well. I think that's really important about, it's not that adage to the working from home, working remotely, is having the flexible hours, so that if you don't necessarily have to take a sick day, but you can just do more another day, as long as you kind of get that work done. And that helps if you have an appointment, then it's better than rather than just taking that time off, then you can kind of make up the hours another way, which is another option.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned flexible hours because my employer actually has flexible hours, but I feel as if, it's recognized within HR, like I said, but when it trickles down to my specific team, they have their own deadlines, they have their own client needs to meet. So they're not as accommodating when it comes to catering to those flexible hours, or they need it done by the end of the day or by close of business at 5 p.m. Therefore, I can't do it after hours or on the weekend or when I'm feeling better. So there does need to be a culture shift of a more accommodating styles when it comes to the disability. But I do feel as if, I don't want to be too critical. I feel as if firms have come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years and that they're doing great. But I think there is more to be done.
That's true. And I think that we are lucky, the fact of our generation, that we are coming into the workplace where things are better. And there are people who have pioneered these things for us ahead of us. And that's something that with casual ableism, I'm hoping to do for others behind me by using my experiences and my kind of bad experiences in the past to then make these better. So we're benefiting from people from people who are ahead of us and making sure that those things are possible for us now. I mean, I think the working from home thing, even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, would not have been possible. So I think we are lucky in the fact that we have kind of come into it. We're kind of in quite a good period of time. Obviously, it's not perfect, but in a positive way, we are better off than some of our predecessors, which is a silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And so, in terms of the companies that you find, are they already inclusive companies? They already have disabled employees, and are they kind of looking to increase diversity, or do you just approach the companies that you think would be good for candidates and then approach them and pitch them the concept?
I think I think it's a bit of both, really. I think we definitely do have targets that are known for being more open to diversity, more ethical, more sustainable in general, or focused on ESG oriented goals. And then there are that are just good firms to work for that, we don't know much about their practice when it comes to diversity or inclusion. And we just approach them and see how they feel about it. And a lot of the time it's positive. There is the occasional bad apple that doesn't really want to participate. But I think for the most part, we have over 700 firms participating with the foundation. Most of the big firms in London, which is great, to be honest. But I think
That's incredible.
I think the initial push towards firms were just it was a mixture of big firms with large infrastructures and the capacity to take on one intern amongst that tens of thousands of employees that they wouldn't have much of an impact on, and B, those that really catered to diversity inclusion and were really committed to it, even if they were slightly smaller, didn't have that big teams, they would still be keen and committed to participating in the program. So it was a combination of both, and we're reaching out to new firms and new sectors year on year, and we're hoping to incorporate and encapsulate as many different firms as we can moving forward. I think we have great representation within a range of sectors, and we don't necessarily have data on their disabled employees or the number they have. We work with a lot of big firms, so we'd assume that most of them would have at least a couple of disabled employees. You can never be too sure, but we hope so. And then beyond that, it's just about giving firms the opportunity to embrace that learning experience and embrace that opportunity to propel themselves to the forefront of diversity and inclusion through the disabled lens.
That's a really good point. And I think it's really amazing. You've got so many different companies involved, and the fact that they're big companies is so important as well. And as you said earlier, about your own experience, how if a company is reluctant, then you don't want to work with them anyway. So you wouldn't want to have those companies offering internships if they were reluctant anyway, because you want those companies that are welcome to change and embrace having disabled interns. That's really good. And I think that I found in my own experience, I found that I had a work placement as part of my course, graphic design, and it was a work placement was part of the credits that we had to for our course, and I found that it wasn't great for me, my experience, and I found that it was an afterthought, and I felt that with my placement I was given, I felt that accessibility was the most important thing. Therefore, I slightly lacked in the quality of the work experience I was getting. So other people were getting more hands-on experience. They were being kind of shadowing people. They were learning new skills, whereas I didn't get that because I had to choose someone that was accessible. Never mind the environment, the experience I was going to learn, because I had to get in the building. And that was something that I feel that it's really important about having proper companies involved that are actually going to give the candidates and the interns proper skills and actually get them proper work experience and knowledge of the workplace, because it's no good having a workplace where you don't learn anything, gain experience. So that's really, really good.
Yeah, so I think having a breadth of employers is really helpful because you don't want to have to limit the interns with disabilities to a specific niche of a few firms that would like to participate. Having that breadth and that choice and that selection really helps to take away the pressure of focusing on accessibility, and they can just focus on the work and what they want to do, what they love to do. So the fact that we work across so many sectors means that someone who's interested in a specific area of finance can focus on that and not just choosing an employer generally within finance that may not cater to specifically what they want to do, but they're accessible, so they'll go for it anyway. That they can choose their specific interests without having to worry too much about choosing an accessible employer.
Definitely, and I think that also that there's, as single people, we don't have any less ambition than anyone else. We still want to go for all those different careers, and so therefore having all the opportunities in different sectors and, as I say, specific areas of a certain sector is really important, because just because we're disabled, we shouldn't have to kind of choose our career around what's going to be most accessible. If we want to be a doctor, we should be able to be a doctor. If we want to be a lawyer, we should be able to be a lawyer. And that's really important as well, to have that variety and that is accessible and not have to worry about, okay, well, I want to do this career, but getting an internship won't be possible, and then getting a job won't be possible because of the industry. And I think certain industries, for example, in more kind of like fashion photography, being an intern stereotypically is being a runner, carrying equipment, and doing things that are possibly physically harder for those of us with disabilities or health conditions. So having sectors that offer what the person wants, but also is kind of tailored so they can still have the work experience and have the internship is really important. So it's not discriminating against any one industry or one career that someone might want to have.
Yeah, and I think we do have some creative industries on board. And the great thing about that is that when, like you said, when it comes to internship experiences, that they won't be expected to be a runner or to carry equipment or to do the legwork, so to speak. So I think it's great in the sense that the typical experience within those industries is shifted to become more accessible, because there are accessible opportunities and jobs within those sectors, but they're just left to the more experienced, if you like. So it's great that we're able to work with those organizations and those industries to create a more accessible experience for our interns.
Definitely, it's really, really good. And I mean, the disability employment gap is a huge topic. And I just Googled some statistics before this, and 52.6% of disabled people were employed in July, September last year, whereas 82.5% of non-disabled people were employed in that same period of time. And that's a huge difference. And of course, I said earlier about having to applying for jobs, and you need to have a certain level of experience in certain jobs. And that's why accessible internships and inclusive environments are so important, so that we can actually get in the door. And once we're in the door, then we have the same opportunities as everybody else.
Yeah, so I believe I read that the employment rates for disabled people have fallen since the pandemic.
Really.
So they've gotten worse, sorry. Unemployment rates have risen, employment rates have fallen. And I think that's largely down to, a post-pandemic push back to the office from a lot of particularly corporate firms that want to maximize productivity and utilize their workforce. And they've gone from being entirely remote to being 3 days in office to being 4 days in office, and it's been um, something that, well, I believe anyway, it's been something that has caused the disabled population to shrink back into whether it's unemployment or whether it's entrepreneurship. I think that they're looking for opportunities that really cater to their needs and they can be flexible around their own needs. And I think a lot of firms are trying to um, move away from completely remote work or flexible work under the guise of um, productivity, if you like. Um, but it's not always appropriate or accessible for their disabled employees. So I think that has I think it's partly obviously due to economic conditions. I think in general workforces have shrunk, but also when it comes to moving away from that remote working to in office working, it's been a discouraging experience and a discouraging time for the disabled population.
Yeah, and I think that anyone who kind of got a job during the pandemic, when it was so heavily work from home, that was such a great opportunity for people to get into employment and into the workforce. So of course that was a great period of time where everyone was normal, everyone was the same from working from home. And if companies are then actually going, okay, now you have to be in the office, those people who chose the jobs because of the remote working are now going to suffer. And I think also people are based all over the country because of the remote working. So it wasn't defined by you have to be in London or in Manchester or in a certain location. And I think that actually there's obviously companies want to have better productivity and want to have people in the building to be able to monitor their work for an output. But at the same time, companies can benefit from saving on costs if people work from home. And if certain types of people, especially people with disabilities or health conditions, possibly they actually work better from home in their own environment. They've got their own proper office chair, like mine's a proper suited to me. They can, have their own environment which is more suitable to them, whether they have autism or ADHD. Possibly they wouldn't be as productive actually in the office. So it is double-edged. I think companies necessarily probably think on a global scale of, okay, this is the majority of the workforce, but then there are the people that actually maybe it's better for them being at home. But I think it's really sad to hear that that's then dropped since the pandemic because of the back to the office push. Because it necessarily needn't be that, and the flexibility should still be there for those of us who may find it easier on different levels for working from home.
Yeah, so I think really it's just about sustaining a balance between accessibility and accommodating to the disabled and also trying to maintain productivity, because I do understand the perspective of these executives and CEOs and bosses that want productivity within the office, because I do agree that a lot of the time teams are more productive when they're together when they're in office, but they also need to understand that it's not always practical for some of their employees. So it's about finding that balance and that compromise and that empathy to cater to the whole workforce in different ways. I think you can't really treat employees with one cookie cutter. You need to treat them on a case by case basis, and that's what a lot of the great firms are doing when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that having that individuality and the flexibility to depending on your employee, because no employee is the same anyway. And I think that having that opportunity to be able to obviously level up. I think that if a company is truly great, then and they have the right training in place, the right environment for employees, then they can actually balance both. They can actually have people in the office and people remotely, because if they offer the right support for their employees and they offer the right environment, even just like a social environment and just mental and the good communication, then it can be possible for their employees to be productive at home. And obviously every company is different, and obviously having people there is better, but definitely having that mixture and that understanding and that inclusion that some people will need to have the time at home is definitely really important. And hopefully that as companies are getting more, hiring more disabled people, are getting more disabled people's perspective, then they're going to also realise that that is actually a possible way. And I think also there's obviously the stereotype that if you work from home, you can be a bit lazy, and that there's obviously the pre-misconception that disabled people in general are lazy. That's a huge stigma in society anyway. So if you say, you're disabled and you work from home, people think that you're slacking off, because people in society, it is changing, but people in society do think disabled people are lazy or do have an easy ride. I think that's also changing by having more disabled people in the workforce.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I think as we have more representation in the workplace, where we're able to influence social stigmas, social perceptions of the disabled community, and going forward, I think over time, I think that they'll hopefully start to disintegrate and shift towards something that's more realistic. Because the perception of laziness is just, it's ridiculous. But in a sense, I understand where it's coming from, but it's just coming from a place of misinformation and a lack of knowledge and information when it comes to disability. So the more we can get that out there, and the more we can enable representation within the workplace, within individual teams to kind of spread that awareness, and then that's great.
Definitely, I think that things like the 10,000 Able Interns is just so great, because that really is, companies are obviously really embracing that, because you've got so many companies that are involved in the program, and therefore you have to have so many interns that are in internships, and that's that's the only way that we're going to help change that message and that stereotype, is by having initiatives like that going on. So I think it's just so great what you're doing, and the fact that also that many disabled people out there that are now getting opportunity to a proper internship, and then they're going to have a better chance at a proper career in industries that are really going to benefit from having that disabled talent as well.
Thank you. So I think one of the things I focused on when we were first setting out was, there's a real opportunity for social change, because the more disabled employees you position within the workplace, the more influence they can have on stigmas and perceptions around disability. And I think that's something that still bears true, because as we grow and as we have more people with disabilities in the workplace, I do think perceptions will shift. And I think one of our main goals is to have those interns eventually rise into positions of seniority. And I think when they're in those positions of seniority, they can influence hiring to be more unbiased, and they can influence, their subordinates within the workplace, and they can really have long-term change and elicit long-term shifts in perception in the workplace. So I think one of the main things we are looking to do, alongside the short-term element of providing work for the employees and providing training for the employers, is a long-term social shift in the perceptions surrounding disability.
Definitely, and that's really, really important, and that's the only way that it's going to happen, is by having those conversations, and actually getting in there with the companies, and talking to the CEOs or whoever it is that you deal with, and saying this is also how a disabled employee can benefit you. It's not just a diversity tick box, it's so much more, and I think the people around us can benefit from us, not because we're anything special, but it's because we do have a unique perspective on things, and we've lived things that other people probably haven't experienced, and so I think it's really important. And even I think companies can benefit from having that more human and holistic kind of aspect on things.
Yeah, I think even when you consider things like um, women in the workforce, but I'd say specifically women in finance, between maybe 1990, the early 2000s, and now there's been a big effort to change the weighting within demographics, and to get women in finance more involved at higher levels when it comes to positions of seniority, and it's worked. So I think if we persist with these programs, whether it's 10,000 Black interns, 10,000 Able interns, I think in the long term there's a real opportunity to have that holistic representation across different demographics within the workplace, because obviously there's still more to be done when it comes to women in corporate positions and sexism and misogyny in the workplace. But I think that there has been a big shift if you look at the data across the last 20 to 30 years. And I hope to replicate that same shift within the Black community and the disabled community across both our programs, and of course any of our future programs when it comes to different demographics. So I think we have a good model, and I think it really puts us in a good position to perpetuate that long-term shift in holistic representation within the workplace, because it's the only way we're going to elicit long-term change.
Definitely, I think even merely just showing young disabled children that there is a career for them in sectors that possibly before there was a representation. It's all about representation and showing people that it is possible if they aspire to be in finance or in a certain sector, that there are disabled people in that sector to follow on to. Because it's I think when I was growing up, I just didn't really see disabled people in the workforce, and I'm sure I wouldn't have seen a disabled accountant or people in the kind of high top firms of London. But now there's, especially with what you're doing, there's more and more of that representation. It shows the young generation that they can do that. There's no reason that they can't achieve that. And as the years go by, and as you're making that social shift and that shift within the employment sector, that you're going to be paving the way for those people and showing them that it is possible. And when they get to that stage, they're actually going to not have as many barriers to face, because companies are going to be like, oh yes, of course, we've had interns with disabilities before, so therefore, of course, and those accommodations and those understandings will be in place already. And obviously at the moment and in previous years, it's been necessarily a battle, but there's always been a push to get those things established. But once that framework's there, then it's going to be, in theory, it's going to be a lot easier for anyone behind us to come through. But I think it's also really important is paving the way and setting those things up so that anyone in the future isn't going to have to kind of battle or have those situations that we may have experienced ourselves.
Yeah. Like you said, I think representation is so important. I think as the years go by, increased representation will only make it easier for disabled people or minority groups in general to take their place in the workforce and to enter the workforce, because as you have that breadth of experience and that breadth of perspective at a higher level, I think there becomes less of a pushback against different groups entering various teams or positions or firms, because there is such a balance of representation, and it's still imbalanced for sure at the top levels, but it's something where it's definitely something we're looking to change, and I believe we are changing, but it will take time. I think most of our interns are still only interns, or they're at the most junior level within their firm, but we hope within time we can affect change in a way that put minority groups or those furthest from that opportunity at the highest levels of firms.
Definitely, it's just so important, just the fact that you're starting the conversation, you're getting those interns in there, and even if they're only low level at the moment, there is that once they're in there, they can then make that change, and any employer who has a disabled intern, they're gonna be changed. They're gonna have that a shift in perspective, and that's just so important. So thank you so much for all that you do and for starting this, collaborating with the 10,000 Black interns to create this 10,000 Able Interns. It's so great, and I do wish that when I was at that stage that there would have been that sort of thing available for me, because it certainly would have been great to even have known about it, and even to have even just applied, even if I hadn't got an internship, just to know that there was someone out there who was really pioneering and giving those opportunities, creating those spaces for people like me. So thank you. And to finish off, do you have any advice for anyone who is thinking about getting an internship, or who's still in university yet to get to that stage of employment or work experience? What would be your advice to them going forward?
So I think if you're at university, definitely apply because you're eligible. So even if you're in your first year or on a gap year, you're eligible to apply. So I guess my first line of advice would be apply to our program, because there are so many spots available to those who really want them, and I think it's a great way to get your foot in the door in the industry you want to be in. And beyond that, more generally, when you look beyond our program, I think just apply to everything and anything you think you might benefit from or you think you may be interested in. I say don't waste your time on things that seem maybe um, prestige or seem that'll look good on your CV if you're not really interested, because it's your time as much as it's their time, and you want to spend your time wisely and spend your time in ways that will benefit you, and spend your time in ways that you want to spend it really. So there's no point in applying to a corporate banking role just because it sounds nice on your CV if you're not really interested. And so I say prioritize your interests and really go for what you want to do. Try not to focus too much on long-term goals. I'd say focus on maybe have a think about what you'd like to do or the area of work you'd like to focus on in the next 2 to 3 years, because it's always difficult to have a long-term goal because they often shift. The smallest of experiences can often shift. So what I like to say to students is have a think about what you'd want to focus on in the next 2 to 3 years, or an area of anything really that interests you, and think about maybe even 2 to 5 years. What would you like to work on? And then beyond that, you can always change, or you can pivot into other things. But really focus on what interests you now, as opposed to what senior position you may want to be in 20, 30 years time. I think just you're the one that's going to have to do the work now, as opposed to focus on getting it done now as opposed to getting it done 10, 15 years down the line. So if you know what you like, or you know what you may be into at this moment in time, then just apply for it. And I'd say don't think too far ahead when it comes to, you don't want to be thinking about what you want to do when you're 40, because it will likely change or fall apart in time for a variety of reasons. So just think about what might you want to do this summer or next summer, and focus on that. And I think applications in general are a chance for you to tell your story. I think when it comes to our application process, those 200-300 words are really a chance for you to present the best version of yourself, and to tell your story, and to be authentic in who you are and what you want to be and what you want to do and why you're applying. So there's no need to be formulaic or to pander to the needs or requests of the firm. Obviously, you have to an extent when it comes to external firm applications. You have to include what they're looking for. But when it comes to our application process, I think just try and be authentic, try and be individual, and try and express your story, your skills, your strengths, your goals, and who you are as a person, and why the firm would benefit from you as a person. I think that there's a lot to be said for being authentic as opposed to being formulaic, and I think that would be my approach when it came to our specific application process. Obviously, to be honest, when it comes to firm-specific applications, when you look at a bunch of different firms, they have their own values and they have their own mission that you have to kind of incorporate into your answers, into your application process, and those should be considered when you're applying to firms. Because, for example, I work in finance. If you look at a bank, they'll have their own set of values, and you want to get those across and portray those within your answers, within your applications, because that's what they're looking for, and that's the easiest way to get through to the next round. But I think if you're talking our application process in particular, I think you'd just be authentic, because it's going to be sent out to a bunch of firms. So you can't really cater to one, which I prefer to this, because you don't have to pander to their wants or needs, and you can just be true to who you are, and you can really tell them your story and why you want to work in this sector, why you're doing what you do. So I think, like I said, if you're talking our application process specifically, just be authentic and be original. And when it comes to firm-specific applications outside of our program. Just do your research, look at their values, look at their mission, look at some of the work they've done in the past. If you're applying to a specific team, look at some of the deals they've worked on. I'm mostly covering corporate here because that's what I know, but I'd say, yeah, if it's corporate, look at some of the deals they've worked on or some of the initiatives that they've launched in the past and some of the things they do as a team and, their areas of expertise, and just build on that and incorporate that into our applications.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because also when you're looking at a job application and a job listing, obviously they are looking for a certain type of skills within that for that role. So therefore one does have to tailor your application and your personal statement and your cover letter to the kind of the specifics of that role that they're advertising for. I think what's really great about being able to apply through the 10,000 Able Interns is that it's already a given that the person is disabled or has a health condition. So you don't have to worry about whether you disclose it or not, because obviously that's an issue. We get a lot of submissions from people saying that they have disclosed a disability and then they don't hear back, or it's going really, really well, and then they disclose their disability and suddenly it's a no, or people who have been given advice actually not to go into the interview with their mobility aid because it could ruin their chances. And so that's obviously something that people have faced in the past. So the fact that with your internships, that it's already known that they have a health condition or disability, so you don't have to worry about how you word it. You can genuinely be true to who you are, because you can actually incorporate that aspect of yourself. Because obviously being disabled, it is part of who we are. It's not necessarily our whole identity, but it is a huge part of who we are and what makes us a good candidate in some respects. So that's really great, is that they can especially as a first step into the workplace with an internship, that you kind of slightly don't have to worry too much, because you're in that space where you already know that you're going to be accepted as a disabled person, because it's what the internships are for. So I think it's really, really great, and your advice is really useful for anyone who's, even people who have already applied for jobs, but just in general, really great advice. Thank you.
No problem. So I think when it comes to disclosing disabilities, I think when you're applying outside of our program, I think that the important thing to do is be upfront early on, because like I said, if they're resistant to disability during the application process, what are they going to be like when you start work? So I wouldn't worry about, leaving your mobility aid behind or not disclosing your disability. I'd say be upfront and be authentic. And, if they respond badly to that, then I know we all need jobs, but it's not really someone you'd want to work for, or a place of employment that would be good for your long-term health if you felt the need to hide that. So I say definitely be upfront from the get-go. And I say normally when I apply for a role, what I do is I send a follow-up email to explain my disability, my requirements during the application process. And then when it comes to employment, day-to-day employment, if I got that role, I would then, on my first day, my first couple of days, explain to my manager the adjustments I would need, which aren't many to be honest, but I would then explain them and just ask them to pass it on to any teams I would be working with. And then, if I move to a new team or if I spend some time in another team temporarily, I'll then explain to the manager of that team. So it's all about being open, being communicative, and I think going in with a positive mindset and thinking that the firms will be inclusive and will be disability friendly, because if you go in apprehensively, I think you're always going to hold stuff back that will only help you in the long term. So like I said, if you are holding stuff back and they only hire you because you didn't come in with your mobility aid, and then you have to come in every day anyway, it was kind of pointless. So I think just be upfront from the get-go, and then that's will weed out not only those that aren't as disability friendly, but it will also make sure you're on the front foot in terms of communication from day one, which will only benefit your career. And I think when you communicate in that way, it only enables firms to give you the adjustments you need to excel in your career. So it's only helpful to you as well as the firm.
That's very true. And I think that it's often can be applying for jobs anyway. and internships, any form of employment, can be very discouraging if you don't hear back for whatever reason, whether it's for disability or just because you're not the right candidate. It can be quite discouraging. I think that it's really good just to remind people that just keep going. If you don't hear back, if you get a rejection letter, then just keep going, because you will find that right one. And even if it takes a while, then it'll, if they don't want you, then you wouldn't want them. So it's really good advice, and it does sort of make sure that when you get that employer and that job, then you know that they're going to be accepting of you and that it's going to be a good environment to be a part of. It's really, 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 really important.
Yeah, I think that's good advice to not just the disabled population, but for anyone really, because I think rejection is redirection in the sense of applying for work. Because I think when you apply to a role and you get to those final stages, it starts to get into your head, and you start to think, you start to envisage maybe like to work there. You start to envisage going to the office, or how long it may take the commute, or working within that role. But then when the rug's kind of pulled from underneath you, obviously it doesn't feel great, and you feel as if you should have got the role, you deserve the role. But then I think going forward, I think there's always a better role out there. You start to build it up in your head and think this will be a great role for me, but there's always a better role that will come about, and not necessarily a better role, but the right role for you will come about in time. Because the jobs you get are the jobs where the firm and the candidate click beyond any other opportunity you've had. So you really want to prioritize those over kind of near misses, whereby you may not have been a good fit, but in reality it's more the firm that wasn't a good fit for you, and they haven't really seen what you can offer within you. So I think if you do get a rejection, it's more just propelling it onto the right path, as opposed to taking you off the path completely. So I think that's really something to keep in mind. Where there's always going to be rejection. It would be unrealistic to expect to get the role each time, because there are so many candidates within this economy. But I think when the right role comes around, you will get it. It's just a numbers game. It's you just have to wait it out sometimes.
Definitely. I think with every application you do and every interview you have, every interaction with a prospective company that you have, it's a learning curve, and you gain experience in that process. Even if it takes, a few months or a year, you're gaining, and you're getting used to how you pitch yourself in a cover letter. You're getting used to how to create your CV. And so every stage, even if you don't get the role and you think it would have been a good role for you, you're still growing as a person, as a candidate, which is also really important to remember, that it's not a setback, it's just a way to step forward and kind of improve on yourself each time, and have that experience to use the rejections or those, the things not working out, to actually, with the next application, you could have pitched yourself better, you reword things, or you could have given even a better shot. But so yeah, it's just good to remember to keep going, and the right thing will come along, and that will be the company that really wants you as well, which is really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think interview practice can't be understated. I think if you have maybe a disability that has presented social barriers to yourself, interviews can be challenging. And I think that practice can be invaluable to any disabled group, even more so those that face those kind of barriers. And I think when it comes to interview practice, even beyond the disabled population, more broadly, it's so valuable in terms of fine honing not only your communication skills and the nuances of your answers, but establishing what you want to do, what kind of person you want to present yourself as, and what kind of person you want to be in those interviews and beyond. So I think with each interview, you gain you gain a fuller understanding of what employers in general are looking for, and you go back each time and you're better. So I wouldn't be discouraged by one rejection, because and particularly if you've never had an interview before, I'd say even to get to that final stage and to fulfill the requirements of that interview is phenomenal. And I'd say always get feedback from the employers if you can, because even if you don't get the role, their feedback is so constructive and valuable in terms of your long-term development as an employee. And you can then fine tune what went wrong, maybe the areas you weren't stronger at, and then build on those in the future for your next interview. Um, so I'd say always look to get something from the interview, even if it's just feedback, because each interview you do, you'll become better, you'll become stronger, you'll become a fuller candidate.
Definitely, and I think it's an opportunity to actually get to know the company a bit as well. As if you find that during the interview you don't like that person or you don't feel that company's the right fit for you, it's also up to you to say to actually reject them, to actually not want to then accept an offer from them, because until you have that interview, you don't know what they're going to be like either, and to hear about the role and the environment that you might be working in as well. And I think it's also really, Stephen Bartlett always says, if you don't ask, you don't get a chance. It's also really important to know that even if you don't see jobs listed or internships listed, it's always worth contacting a company that you really like or you'd like to work for and pitching yourself to them, sending them your CV. Because if you don't ask, you're never gonna know. So you might as well take that risk and see if they've got any opportunities open. And then in the future, they may then go to remember that you sent them an email, a month ago, when they actually are at the moment of hiring. So that's also really good to know, that you just kind of can be proactive in that way and approach companies who aren't necessarily advertising publicly that they're hiring.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, because what I found is a lot of the time is HR, working with so many different firms within the program. I think firms will often they'll be aware of roles coming up weeks before they advertise in some cases. So if you do put your CV in and say, "Can I be considered if any role within this sphere, this sector pops up," then it's a great way for you to get ahead of the crowd externally. And it may not always work, to be honest. It may just be overlooked, but there will be instances whereby an appropriate role will pop up and they'll say, "Look, this person sent in their CV a week ago. We haven't opened up applications publicly yet, but we can always consider them alongside our internal candidates." And I think that's a great way to be proactive.
Definitely. And it's always worth a shot. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And even if you could have, obviously different times of the year, there are more jobs available than others. So even if you feel like you're not getting anywhere, it's always, even for your own peace of mind, to know that you're doing that extra bit. And you never know what these things can bring. And I think it's just really good to try, and then you're on file. And also it shows initiative. That a company may think, gosh, look at that person, they're stepping outside the box, they're contacting us directly because they want to work with us. And that's also a good to show that to a future employer as well.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side, there will also be employers that are like, "Why are you sending in your CV through the improper channels?" But you have nothing to lose, really. Like, I think just send your CV out there, and if firms respond in that way, then it doesn't affect you at all. It's the same as not doing anything in a way. Um, but then if you do receive that one employer that says, they've shown great initiative, we're actually looking for someone of this um, intellectual build, then it works out well for you, and it's worth the chance, I think, when it comes to applying for roles. Just beyond those I'm not saying abandon the traditional applications, go for those completely, but also, if there is a firm you'd like to work on, they don't have to work you'd like. Send a message to HR and say, "This is what I want to do." If you have anything in that area, or even closely linked or remotely related to that area that you're considering in the near future, I'd love to be considered. And just send a cover letter of who you are, why you want to work in that sector, and why you want to work for that firm specifically, and try and incorporate their values. And when it comes to sector specific um, areas of your CV, of your cover letter, do some research on the sector and incorporate that. And the firms work within the sector, incorporate all of that together, make it no more than a page long, maybe 700, 750 words. Have one paragraph on yourself, one paragraph on why you want to work for the firm, one paragraph on why you want to work in that sector. And then once you build all that together with some research incorporated from the sector, the firm, and really tie that into your own values, I think when you send that off and you tailor it to specific employees, there's a really good chance that, I mean, that goes just beyond, ad hoc emails, that goes into your applications as well. if they do ask for a cover letter, that's exactly how you want to approach it. You want to make your CV a page long, your cover letter a page long, because if these employers are printing out the CVs, a page and a half just becomes awkward to read. And my brother actually sent me his CV last year, and it was about 5 pages long, and he just tries to include everything he'd ever done in bullet point form. And I said to him, "Look, I'm gonna have to cut this down." He sent it to me for feedback, and it was way too long. So I condensed it into a page, which is the most important thing to do, in my opinion. You want to A, highlight the things that are most appropriate for the role, and B, show your ability to communicate in a way that isn't superfluous and is in a way that can be concise. So if you keep that to a page and you keep your cover letter to a page with 3 paragraphs, maybe an introductory paragraph and a short conclusion, that's around 750 words. I think you're giving yourself a really good chance within traditional application processes, and also beyond that, if you're sending ad hoc emails to HR, that's also a really good way to go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really important skill to develop as well. And I think I saw online that you are also offering workshops and talks to people. I think you're doing you're doing a university tour, going to different locations to talk to students.
Yeah, so I believe our community engagement manager Julie and our program assistant Shivani are going around talking to different universities all over the country. I think today they were in Birmingham, I believe, and they're going to Warwick, my university. They've been to they've either been or they're going to Cambridge, but they're going to a bunch of universities up and down the country, trying to raise awareness of the program, of both programs, and just trying to get students to sign up. And I believe the CV workshops are over for this year. But if any listener does want some CV feedback, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I can always run through your CV with you and just give you a little bit of feedback, because I did run a few of the CV workshops, so I'm happy to give that feedback informally. But I think, yeah, going forward, we're just trying to raise as much awareness as possible as we enter the final few weeks of the application cycle, because we have to set a relatively early deadline, because firms then need to take in the CVs, consider their different teams, go through their own application process, vetting process, and then work on reasonable adjustments and have that chat about disability, and then going forward, offer them a place. So that all needs to be done by February, March time. So we set our deadlines relatively early to try and cater to all of that.
That's really good. And I think that it's really great that you actually go into universities individually, because I think also it's not just the employers that need to have that mentality about hiring disabled talent. It's also, if that kind of conversation can start in university, so that when you have career advice, when you're kind of talking about career paths in education, then that's already mentality that's already established, rather than hearing about these employment options and then you thinking that's not suitable for me. But if that can start from university before you get to that stage, that's also really important. So then the universities themselves can, I guess, cater their career advice to those disabled students as well. I think something that I found was lacking for me was any kind of individual support or even conversation that would be tailored to me specifically. So that's really good that you're going around and raising the awareness so that more people can know about it, and even if they're not eligible themselves, they may have a friend or a family member or someone coming up behind them that may be. And so just to get that message out there and the awareness is just so great. And I think it's really amazing that what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think also the important thing about the tools is people with specific disabilities may be apprehensive towards applying, because they may feel as if their disability isn't as maybe worthy as more severe disabilities, so that they may feel as if they're taking a place from someone else. But A, there are so many spots to go around, and B, we cater to a range of disabilities for a reason, because they're all subject to institutional ableism and workplace ableism, and they're subject to those barriers that prevent them from gaining experience in the workplace. So the criteria is there with good reason, and that those that are eligible are more than worthy of applying. So we wouldn't want anyone to be discouraged or feel as if really to feel uncomfortable in applying, because as long as you meet the eligibility criteria, you're more than worthy of applying. So that's what we try and reiterate within our tours and every time we talk to prospective interns, really.
Yeah, that's really important because also, every disability is valid and every different type is valid. And also that's a representation of society. There's so many different types of disabilities and every single one is as valid, and every single one, no matter the severity of it, it's still as valid, and they still, no matter who it is, they still face a certain barrier in society because of that health condition or that disability. And that's a really, really good point to make sure that everyone in the disability community is included, because we face enough discrimination in the outside community, so that it's really good to make sure that even our own spaces within the community are inclusive and don't discriminate against anybody.
Yeah, and I think I don't want there to be this exclusivity around the program, because as a foundation, we try and be as inclusive as possible. Exclusivity isn't something we practice at all. We do cater to those furthest from opportunity, but that doesn't mean we're trying to be exclusive in that sense. I think, even if you aren't in our eligibility criteria that's listed, if you feel as if you've been subjected to physical or social barriers to employment, we still encourage you to apply. We want anyone that feels they would benefit or feels that they're eligible in a genuine way to apply. So we're not being exclusive at all. We want to try and include as many students who have felt difficulties due to their disability or long-term health condition to apply.
That's really good, and it's really important that is such a great message that you're also sharing. So for anyone listening who's interested, who would like to know more information or who'd like to apply, where can they find more information? How can they follow you on social medias? Just get a bit of an overview of that.
Okay, so I guess in the first instance, if you want more information, just go to 10,000internsfoundation.com. We have information on both the Black Interns program and the Able Interns program. And by the way, if you're a Black disabled student, you are able to apply for both, so you essentially double your chances of getting an internship, which is great, because they do face compounded barriers to entry being Black and disabled. So we like to open up opportunities to both programs. So I think beyond that, if we're focusing specifically on 10,000 Able Interns, you're able to find the information on the website. There are FAQs. There's an information pack for candidates and firms for anyone listening that may want to incorporate their firm into the program. There's information for both sides, and then the link is very straightforward. And if you do have any difficulties, you can always email. I think it's general@10,000internsfoundation.com, and also general@10,000internsfoundation.com. Or you can message me directly on LinkedIn if you like. I'll always see to your issue and make sure you're in the right place. Social media, we're at 10,000 Able Interns on Instagram. I don't know if we're on Twitter. We might be, but I don't use Twitter myself. So take a look. If we're not there, then we're not there. If we are, then we are. But I know on Instagram we're at 10,000 Able Interns. LinkedIn we're 10,000 Able Interns. And I think that may be it. I think we're on TikTok, but we're not really active on TikTok at the moment. We're still trying to get to grips with TikTok. So we're 10,000 Able Interns on every platform, really. And also 10,000 Interns Foundation. Just that's our handle. And then 10,000 Black Interns if you're interested in our Black Interns program. And that's it really when it comes to social media. I think that's where you can follow our progress, our opportunities, and just engage with the community in general.
Great, thank you. And I'll link everything in the episode description so that anyone who's listening can then also find the direct links that way. So it's really easy. But that's really great. And thank you so much for spending your time this afternoon to chat to us. And
Thank
I think it's
you.
really important, obviously, casual ableism. On our main Instagram account, we highlight the kind of negative experiences of, ableism. But I think it's also really important to talk about programs, initiatives like the 10,000 Able Interns that are actually doing real positive work to try and end the ableism as well. So thank you for coming on and for talking great conversation about a variety of topics. I think that people are going to find this really, really useful, and hopefully it's inspired some people to apply and take that leap into the world of internships in the workplace.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the talk today, and yeah, I mean, if you're looking to apply, just go for it. There should be nothing holding you back. But if you do have any apprehensions, like I said, just feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Um, yeah, I think you just go for it. Really, I think you only. I mean, there's always a chance to be rejected with everything, but you'll never know until you try. And I think you'll never succeed until you try either. So if you are apprehensive and you do shy away from opportunity, then you're only limiting yourself. And I think we're all capable of so much that you may as well go for it and see, kind of explore the limitations of what you can achieve. Because I think you'll find you're capable of so much more than you know really. So I say just go for it and see what comes of it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I like to give credit to the whole team, because we have maybe, I don't know exactly now, but we have around 12, 14 employees that work so hard on the program, on the overall foundation each day. And I know Rebecca was supposed to be here today. I know she's gutted to not be here. I think she was really excited. So it was definitely something important that would have pulled her away from the opportunity to be involved in the podcast. But I'm sure she'll be back another day. And she
Definitely. Yeah.
was definitely really disappointed not to be here today. But I hope I've proved to be a worthy replacement on my own. And
Definitely.
thank you. And yeah, like I said, if anyone has any kind of apprehension or needs any help, or even if it's outside of the program and they just like help with a CV kind of review, or any advice when it comes to an interview they have coming up, just reach out to myself. And we have a range of resources and expertise that can help you in your way.
And it's really good. I think that anyone who is apprehensive in taking that step, I think the fact that this is such a sort of a safe way to do that, because of it is for people with disabilities. Therefore, it just feels like it's such a safe environment that it's not going to be judged or anything. So I think that this is one of those real opportunities where it's safe to take that risk, and it's safe to apply, because you're not going to lose that. You can only gain from it. And even if you don't get this round, there'll be another round next year, I assume, that people can always apply to. And yeah, the great work from the whole team. And thank you so much for giving this opportunity to disabled students and people who are looking for internships. It's really great. Thank you so much, Sami.
Thank you. I think just to finish really quickly, I think that's a really good point. If you don't get the opportunity this year, you can always apply next year. And likewise, on the flip side, if you do get the opportunity, you can always apply again next year, whether it's the same industry or you've applied to finance, you don't like finance, you want to try communications and branding next year, or marketing, you can apply to something completely different next year and broaden the horizons of your experience year on year. So I wouldn't be discouraged if you don't get an opportunity this year, because the size of our program is expanding exponentially year on year. So there'll be more and more opportunities as the years go by, and just keep applying year on year. And even if you graduate, we're open to recent graduates. I believe that the 2024 program is eligible to students that graduated in 2020 or beyond. So there's kind of a 4-year kind of backlog, if you like. I don't know the right word, but backlog students that can apply. So even if you apply year on year and you don't get something, or you don't get the right opportunity for you, just keep applying, and all the experience adds up.
That's really good to know that anyone who doesn't get a chance this year, then that's really good to know there will be other chances. And yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been really great to talk to you, and I'm sure that there'll be future opportunities with Rebecca as well.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Good day. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and our discussion with Sami Dar, co-founder of 10,000 Able Interns. If you're interested in their program, check out the links in this episode description to learn more about the 10,000 Able Interns and the 10,000 Interns Foundation in general. Don't forget, you can follow us over on Instagram at Casual Ableism. If you have an experience of ableism that you'd like to submit to us, then check out the link to the Google form where you can submit your story to us and have it posted over on our account. Don't forget that it can be anonymous or you can be tagged, so there's no pressure. And thanks for listening. Bye!